stragglers over there? Sorry, I can't, like, Dante, you know that I can't multitask and I can't look in more than one direction at a time. By the way, hello, ninth period class. Glad to see you all here. I think I'm as excited about this new after hours thing as you guys are.
That's your idea, you should be.
Well, we talk about it in class. Like, it just becomes, we never get anything done. So, initially I was going to talk to you guys about Jonah, because Jonah is the story of my life, although not my favorite passage from Scripture, because Jonah's story is about somebody who God has said, listen, I want you to do this, and he says, you know what, God, I don't think so, peace, bye. And that basically is my life for most of my life. But I was going to do that, and then as I was praying and thinking about you guys, my high schoolers in particular, I thought, let's go back to Moses, because one of my favorite verses is in the book of Exodus, and it's from the story of Moses. So tonight's sermon title, if I have one, is called Who Am I? Because I think for most of you in your adolescent age, that's something that you ask yourselves. I think of Alice in Wonderland, the book and the movie, and that Alice is a young girl and she encounters this caterpillar who says, who are you? And she can't answer him. And I think that for a lot of us, that we're at this age, or, well, you guys are at this age, but in your 20s too, you're at this age where there's kind of this thing where it's like, I think that I'm this, but I'm kind of like this, but I'm also a little bit like this, and trying to define who you really are, especially since you guys are older middle school or younger high school. So we're going to find out a little bit about Moses, this awesome hero of the Bible who went through the exact same questions, and then we'll find out a little bit about who God says that you actually are. So if you can turn to page 35 in your Bibles, we're going to Exodus chapter 1 is where we'll start. And so the story, if you can picture this in your mind, we're going back to ancient Egypt, like back to the time of the pharaohs. So we're in ancient Egypt, and there's a pharaoh who would basically kind of like the king, the one in charge, and he has enslaved the Hebrew people, so the Jewish people. He has captured them, and they're building these huge monuments for him. And if you have enslaved somebody, there comes a certain point where you're worried if their population gets too big. Because if you have too many slaves, maybe they will revolt and they'll overthrow you, and they have too much power. So because of that, Pharaoh's concerned that the slave population is growing. He's thinking, well, what if they revolt? So Exodus 1:22 says, Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. So this is going to be population control, because if we have too many strong Hebrews, it's not a good thing. So he's going to have them thrown into the river. Well, unfortunately, at this time, Moses' mom was pregnant. And it turns out that Moses was born. He was Hebrew, so his mother hid him for 3 months. Then, you want to talk about abandonment issues, listen to this. She hides him for 3 months, which I imagine if you've ever lived with a baby, I don't know how she did that, but she hid him for 3 months. Then, because he's getting too big to hide anymore, she puts him in this like basket, okay, so like a basket made out of reeds that would float on the river. She has his older sister kind of go along with him next to the basket, but they put the basket in a river. The basket floats down the river, and it lands in this little area where the Pharaoh's daughter and her maids were all bathing and washing their clothes and stuff like that. So, I come from a home where I had abandonment issues growing up, I'll be honest with you guys a little bit. So I thought, my dad was an alcoholic, which when I was growing up, I didn't understand that it was a disease, and I just thought that, wow, he doesn't love me. He would rather have a bottle of beer than have a daughter. That was how I felt growing up. So Moses has it probably just as bad, where he's going to grow up going, wow, my parents put me in a basket and sent me down a river. Like a crocodile could have eaten me, you know? So, but Miriam's following alongside, and she follows, and Moses makes it safely to the Pharaoh's daughter, who sees this cute little baby, and she's like, oh, baby, and she decides to keep him. So she decides to adopt him. So you've got somebody who's Hebrew, who's being raised by somebody who has totally different beliefs, totally different ethnicity than him. And so now, what is he? Is he Hebrew? Is he Egyptian? I don't know. Who are his real parents? Is it his Hebrew mother, who he winds up getting to kind of reconnect with as she nurses him? Or is it this Pharaoh's daughter who is raising him in the palace? So there's a lot of confusion about who am I based on my religion? Who am I based on my ethnicity? Who are my parents? Who do I even count as my family? And so Moses has all this that he's going through as he's growing up. So he's raised like an Egyptian, but he's always aware of his otherness, that he's a little bit different. He might look a little bit different, or it could be the story of, you know, you see TV shows and somebody's adopted and they say, why didn't you have any pictures of me before I was 7? And you're like, oh, you know, we just didn't think to take any. But, you know, Moses might be like, you know, why are there no hieroglyphs about the time when I was, you know, before I was 3 months old or something? I don't know. But Moses, he's always aware that he's an outsider. And this starts the idea, the process of who am I? He becomes very insecure about his identity. And I can prove that to you. We'll go there in a few chapters. But he becomes insecure and he's wondering, who am I? And that's going to be the question that kind of sticks with Moses throughout the book of Exodus. So now we can go to Exodus 2, verses 11 and 12. So remember, the Egyptians were enslaving the Hebrew people. Those things, those pyramids, the Sphinx that you would see, the Hebrews were the ones actually making that. Free labor, cheap labor, but they had enslaved them. And Moses was of Hebrew descent. So even though he was not raised Hebrew, that's kind of what's in his blood. So it says, many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went off to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. Okay, Moses, one of the heroes of the Bible, is a murderer. I don't know what sins you guys have committed, but I bet you haven't committed murder. So I just want you to keep that in mind, because sometimes we think, I'm too messed up. I've done too many things. I should just quit now because there's nothing that God can ever do with me because I'm a wreck. I'm a mess, and I'm a train wreck, and you know what? I've done horrible things. And you guys, you're like, oh, Mrs. you don't know. If you knew the website I was on last night, or if you knew the thing that I did last weekend, you wouldn't want to ever talk to me again. And that's probably not the case. First of all, because, you know, everybody's got different things. There's few things that you can say that would shock me. But also because I've read the Bible and I've read the things that people have done and I've seen that God still uses them for something great.
That's right.
So, anyway, so Moses is a murderer, okay? He kills somebody. Also, he's kind of sneaky about it because he makes sure, like, he looks around to make sure that, like, no one's watching, and then he kills the man, and then he hides the body in the sand. So he's a murderer, and we've all sinned too, although hopefully not murder. I don't know, my ninth period people.
Wow.
But anyway, in shame, he runs away, and he becomes a shepherd. Okay, so he went from living in this palace, basically, to I'm going to live in a field with a bunch of sheep. Because I feel so ashamed. Because people are going to find out what I did, I'm going to hide from those people, and I'm going to run away. Now, I just want to share another part from my life. And it's a trend that I have, a little bit like Jonah, and a little bit like Moses here, where when I begin to do things that I know are not right, when I do things that I know would maybe disappoint God a little bit, because God's like our Father, and just as a parent might be disappointed in you, I know that I've done things that have disappointed God before. But, so when I start to do those things, I start to run away too. Now, not like really run away, but what I do is I stop taking phone calls, I act like I'm super busy, I'm kind of a jerk to people, that way they don't want to spend time with me, but it's my way of isolating myself and putting up these walls because I'm trying to hide in my shame. But God is bigger than any wall that you can build. Because God finds Moses when he's out there in the wilderness tending to his sheep, doing his whole shepherd thing. He appears to him and he has a message for him. So if you can turn with me now to Exodus 3. Exodus 3, verse 1. So one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses. Then jump to verse 7. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of the harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt. Now, the Old Testament and the New Testament, some people say, why do we read the Old Testament? Isn't everything about the cross, about the grace that comes after the cross? And it is, and that's why we should read the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, oppression of people, these people being kept in slavery, oppression basically means suffering, or holding somebody in a place of suffering. So God says to Moses, these people are suffering. And I've heard them cry out to me. I've heard them pray to me to say, God, please end my suffering. Please end my suffering. Oppression today might look like an addiction. Oppression today might look like shame. It might look like low self-esteem. And so God says to Moses, he says, I want you to go rescue my people from oppression. We're not talking about literal slavery here, if we're talking 21st century Camden. But instead, there are things that people are enslaved to.
That's right.
And so that's what God is calling Moses to let these people out of. He's asking him, I need you to go set my people free in a literal sense. We're talking a figurative, spiritual sense here for what God is calling you guys to do,
Right.
and what he's asking you to do for Camden. So he says, Moses, go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. So this is Moses, who, abandoned by his parents in a little raft thing. He was raised by somebody who wasn't really his mom, taught in different customs, and then he kills someone and he leads Egypt in shame. And he's probably got all these questions dude, I'm a murderer. I can't go back there. Or me? My parents didn't even want me. God, why do you want me to do something?
Right.
And instead, so it says Moses protested to God. Through Exodus 3, 11 and 12, two of my favorite scriptures of my whole time serving God. So 11, Moses protested to God. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And this is a legitimate question, okay? If God wanted to deliver these people, why not just do it on his own? Why use a man? Why use a man like Moses, who was now a poor shepherd, who had killed somebody, who had this messed up family life before that? Why use him? And I can't give you an answer as to why God chooses who he chooses. But I know that God chooses people. And we're going to end on that in a minute. But Moses says, who am I? You guys might think I'm too young, I'm too sinful, I'm not powerful enough, I'm not smart enough. And even if you guys don't think that, that's what I was thinking as I was getting ready for this. I thought, I'm too young. I didn't go to Bible school. I've committed too many sins. I have a bad attitude about things. Those were the things that I was thinking, getting ready for this, saying, God, I can't speak to these kids. I don't have anything to give them. God, why would you ask me to do that? And these are the types of questions that we ask ourselves. Who am I? Who am I to do that? I don't have that position or that privilege, but God's calling us. So, Owen, do you have my picture? Owen's going to put a picture up in a second. And what I love about, I was reading in my Bible, and so this is actually a picture from my Bible. And I just want to show you that this heading, God chooses Moses, comes before the birth of Moses. Now, you guys that have me for a teacher know that I get real nerdy about words and stuff like that. But I just think that it's so important that God chooses Moses comes before the birth of Moses. God chose you before you were born.
That's right.
You were not born on accident. You were born on purpose. And God has a plan for you, even if it looks like, even if your life up until this point looks like, what the heck, God?
That's right. Yeah.
Something else I want to say, and this is going a little off the notes, so bear with me. For those of you who have said, yeah, I've been here for 2 years or for 5 years, and I've heard you say this, and I've heard other people say this, and I don't see anything happening. I want to take you back to James 4:8 that Kathy referenced during worship, which says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And I want to show you something else about Moses. Moses questioned God, and he said, God, why would you choose me? But Moses is always obedient. Moses, a couple of times, he comes up and he says, God, I can't. I stutter. I stammer. I'm slow of speech. I can't go speak for you. I can't be your representative. I can't go face Pharaoh because he's like big, mighty, powerful Pharaoh, and I'm just like little Moses. I can't go speak to him. He protests in chapter 4. He's doubting God. He says, well, the Israelites, they're not going to listen to me. They're going to say, who are you? Why would God choose you? Why would God send you? And each time, God says, if you do this, if you act in faith, I will give you a sign. So let's look at Exodus 4:1. But Moses protested again. What if they won't believe or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? And then in 4:10, kind of the same thing. Moses kind of whines a lot. Okay, 4:10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I have never been, and I'm not now, even though you have spoken to me. I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." Then the Lord asked Moses, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say." So Moses, I get the feeling, is terrified. Probably as terrified as I was getting ready for this. Probably as terrified as you might have been the first time that you invited your parents to church, or one of your friends to church, or the first time that somebody invited you to do something, to go watch some movie that you thought, yeah, I probably shouldn't, that's probably not something that I should really be exposing myself to. Or the time that they wanted you to join them drinking at the party, and you said, I'm gonna pass. Probably as terrified as you were at that moment is Moses being terrified here. But Moses is obedient. So God tells Moses, he says, "I will be with you." If we look at 3:12, sorry, I'm kind of hopping all over the place here. But 3:12, God answered, "I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain." What I want you to see is that he has to be obedient, and then he gets the sign. I spent so many years sitting and waiting and wishing and saying, "God, give me a sign, and then I will be obedient." And it's the other way around. God says, "Be obedient, and then I will give you a sign that I was with you the entire time." Exodus 3:14, I love this too, because God is honest. And in 3:14, God replied to Moses, "I am who I am." It's such a huge contrast to Moses, who's like, "Who am I? Who am I that you would call me?" Then you've got God who says, "I am who I am." Is it all capitalized in your version?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's all capitalized in mine too. "Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you." Because God admits to Moses, he's like, you know what, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to go talk to Pharaoh. You're going to have people who aren't going to believe you. But when they don't believe you, just say, "The I am sent you." So God is open and says, it won't be an easy call. He says, "I know the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him." Okay, so let's see. If I'm Moses, I've got all these personal problems, like with my family and my identity, and I have low self-esteem, and I have some speech thing going on that I'm afraid of. I used to be like high and mighty, and now I'm poor and this lowly guy. And now God calls me, and He wants me to go back to these people who used to see me as one way, and He wants me to go back to them and say something to Pharaoh. I don't know. I don't think I can do that. And then God says, "Oh, and by the way, it's going to be difficult." No, God, I want easy. Like, I thought this was easy. I thought this was going to be easy when we signed up. And it turns out God says it's not going to be easy. But my final thing that I want to say is that God will be with you. If we look at 3:11, is me saying, "God, who am I? Who am I that you would call me, that you would want me to do anything?" And then 3:12 is what I'm so thankful for, when God says, "I will be with you." Because God will be with you in whatever it is that He has called you in. And by the way, I want to clarify this too. Calling is not just being a pastor or something. When I was your age, actually all through high school and through most of college too, I saw my friends going off to Bible school, and I thought, well, am I called to something? Is there a purpose? Like, do I have a purpose? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I used to think, ironically enough. I just think, I'm like, the last thing I want to do is be a teacher. But there was this thing inside me that kept saying, like, you gotta be a teacher, you gotta be a teacher, you gotta be a teacher, and you gotta come back and teach in Camden.
Yep.
And I thought, no, that's the last thing I want. I don't want that. I don't want to come back here to the same people that I came from. I don't want to be like Moses, who left Egypt and came back to Egypt and had a message for them. Like, I don't want that. I want to go someplace new, start something new. But here I am, just like Moses. Came from Camden.
Right.
Came from the crazy, dysfunctional family. Came from the insecurity. Came from the things. You can ask Peggy back there. I didn't talk when I was in high school. Wouldn't get 2 words out of me. I mean, I walked around with a book in my face and my head down, and I hoped that nobody would talk to me in school, because what would I say? I just figured they'd be teasing me if they talked to me. I mean, I didn't think couldn't trust anyone. But I had all these problems just like Moses. But just like in Exodus, thousands of years ago, when God told Moses, I'll be with you, he was with me. And that's why I believe the same thing for you guys. I believe that for whatever call God has on your life, maybe your call is to reach your family. Maybe your call is to reach the people on your sports team. Maybe you're going to go into broadcasting and change the way that we receive information. I don't know what your call is, but I do believe that God has a call on your life, on each of you. And I don't know all your names, but I can still believe that that's true. The Bible says it. And because I've seen it in my life, I've seen it in the lives of other people in this room. So I believe that God has a call for each of you. God chose you. Just like it said that God chose Moses before Moses was even born, same is true with you guys. He has a plan for you and a purpose for you, your family, your past sins, your intellect, your disability, your age, whatever it is that you think you have going against you, God doesn't even see it. Sometimes those things that you went through, you're going through because God's going to be able to use whatever it was that you came through to deliver somebody else. I don't know if that makes sense, so I'm going to try to go through that one more time. The stuff that you're going through right now, with your family, with your friends, with your addictions, with the things that you are ashamed of, the things that keep you up at night, those things that you struggle with on a daily basis, God can use those to deliver somebody else. But the key is you have to be obedient to God. That when God says, I'm calling you into this, you can be scared, that's fine. Moses was scared. Moses talked back to God, which I don't know that I would ever do that. I mean, God appears to him in a burning bush, and he's like, God, what are you, who am I? Like, I don't think I would ever, verbally question a manifestation of God. But I have said before, I've been like, yeah, no, not now, God, not now. I kind of like what I'm doing, or I'm scared of change, and I don't want to change. And there was nothing. There was no purpose there. But as soon as I was willing to be obedient to God, then I found a purpose for my life. Then it was worth waking up in the morning. Then I was no longer suicidal. So, just saying, you have to be obedient to the call that God has on you. It is terrifying. I don't think anybody would tell you that it's not terrifying. It is terrifying, but God is always faithful, and he will see you through. So I just want to pray with you guys, if you guys can bow your heads. Father God, I thank you for every person that you have placed in here tonight, God. God, I believe that they are even here tonight to hear this message, God, because you have something that you want to work in their hearts, God. And God, I thank you that you are always faithful to us.